So let's say you're trying to describe how to take a random sample. In AP Statistics, there are certain things we want to make sure that we say and that we're fully describing it. So I'm going to give you a little list and then we'll look at an example. So when you're describing a random sample, the first thing that you want to do is say specifically how you will identify or number the individuals. And if necessary, if you're describing a cluster or stratified sample, you want to say what the clusters or strata are. Second, you're going to name and describe a specific method to use for randomness. So you might use a random number generator, you might flip a coin, you might roll a die, or even just pick slips of paper from a hat. But we want to make sure that we're naming what method to use and that we are being as descriptive as possible with that. Third is we will explain what the chosen individuals will do once they've been selected. And remember to always be specific and include context. So let's look at an example. Let's say we were describing how to select a simple random sample of 5 students from a group of 30. So one thing I could say, I'm going to start by saying assign each student a unique number from 1 to 30. So I assign them numbers and I'm specific about which numbers to use. So I don't just say assign each student a number, I say specifically from 1 to 30. Then I'm going to use the method. So I'm going to say use a random number generator to generate 5 unique numbers from that range. Repeated numbers will be ignored. I want to make sure to say repeated numbers will be ignored. We could also just say the word unique. We don't have to do both of these. Basically, that tells whoever's reading your instructions to ignore any repeated numbers. We want 5 different numbers from that list of 1 to 30. Then I would want to say what those 5 students whose numbers were chosen will do. So maybe in this example, you would have to have context, but maybe the 5 students whose numbers were chosen will get a high five from their teacher. But whatever it is the problem indicates these students are going to do, we would be descriptive about that. So that's one example. Another thing we could do for that same simple random sample is to write the students' unique names on slips of paper, put them in a hat, stir the slips around. Then without looking, draw 5 slips of paper from the hat without replacement because we want 5 different students. We don't want to pick the same student twice. And then the 5 students whose names were chosen will receive a high five from the teacher. Let's say we were doing a stratified or a cluster sample of 5 students from a group of 30. So for stratified, maybe we might say, okay, I'm going to stratify by grade level. So I want to say that first. And suppose there are 20 seniors and 10 juniors in the class. So I stratify by grade level, which means I separate the seniors and the juniors. Then I would say that I'm going to number them, and I'm going to be specific about the numbering. So I'm numbering the seniors from 1 to 20, and I'll number the juniors from 21 to 30. Next, I have to use a method. So I'm going to use a random number generator to choose 3 unique numbers from 1 to 20 and 2 unique numbers from 21 to 30. And then the 5 students whose numbers were chosen will. Okay, so notice that I had to specifically say to choose some of the numbers from the juniors and then some of them from the seniors. So that's what gets us our stratified sample. But I'm specific about how to do that process. So anybody who does this process or follows my instructions will do the same thing. They may not get the same students, but they'll do the same thing. If I was wanting to do a cluster, I would again want to make sure and say what the clusters are first. So suppose the students are seated in groups with 5 students at each table. Let each table represent a cluster. Then I'm going to randomly number the tables or the clusters from 1 to 6, because 6 times 5 is 30. If there's 30 students and 5 at each table, there are 6 clusters. So I'm going to number them from 1 to 6. Again, I'm being specific with how I'm numbering them. Then I'm going to use a random number generator to just choose one number from 1 to 6. I just need one table. And then all 5 students in the cluster whose number were chosen will receive a high five from the teacher. So those are 2 examples of how I might describe a stratified or cluster sample from a group of 30. Same basic rules. We want to be specific about the numbering. We want to say what method of randomization we're using. And then we want to finish by being in context about what those chosen things or people will do. The only added thing that we do with stratified and cluster is we are specific about how to stratify or form the groups that we're doing. And a lot of that comes from details from the problem that we are dealing with at that time. So that is how we describe a random sample.